Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cricket Talks. I'm joined by Jack from Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you, Ethan. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here talking all things cricket with you today. Very excited.
So we have England, West Indies, and Australia, South Africa tonight. Some very exciting cricket. What's your most exciting player?
Well, I think for Australia, it's obviously going to be Glenn Maxwell. Obviously, the big show. He's going to be very important for Australia's chances. For South Africa, some guys who can do some damage. So I don't really have a player to watch out for South Africa. For England, Liam Livingstone, he's been talked about a lot, so probably him. And from the West Indies, well, they've got a lot of match winners. Probably the universe boss, Chris Gayle.
I very much look forward to it, and as you see, there's a fly on me, so I'm clearly Australian. What was I going to ask about? Last night, a hectic night of cricket, basically to decide the Super 12s. We had Namibia, Ireland, and Sri Lanka v Netherlands. And, well, Netherlands was skittled for a very low score. But what was your take on those two games?
Okay, so first of all, Namibia and Ireland was a bit of a upset, you have to say. I wasn't expecting that. No one was expecting that. Namibia, first T20 World Cup for them ever, and it's great to see them qualify for the Super 12 stage. Ireland, I expected them to win, but unfortunately, they didn't quite perform, really. They got going in the game. They lost wickets at regular intervals when they were batting. I think there were none for 55 inside the power play, and they lost 8 for 70 in the next 14 overs. So Namibia did well to peg them back and keep them to a reasonable target to chase. And obviously Namibia batted smartly and chased down the runs with ease. It's great to see Namibia do what they do, and great to see them playing well. So hopefully we can see better things from them in the Super 12 stage.
We're going to talk about Australia's upcoming games. So, very exciting. Australia versus South Africa tonight. Really looking forward to it. Then Australia versus Sri Lanka, which is on the 28th of October, which will be on a Thursday night. Then it'll be quite late as well. And on the 30th will be England versus Australia. On the 4th of November is Australia v Bangladesh. What's your take on these upcoming games, Jack?
Well, they're going to be tough, to be honest, Ethan. For Australia, we're up against it in this World Cup. All those games, it's probably the group of death for Australia. To quote soccer, it's the group of death. It's not the group that you want to be in. All these teams are going to be very difficult for Australia to beat and win. Based on our current form, do I see us winning any games? It doesn't look good, but you never say never in cricket. You've got to be optimistic. And Australia just got to play well. But it's going to be tough for us to make it to the semis. And Australia don't have big expectations in this World Cup. Let's be honest, the expectations are quite low, given our form and recent history in the T20s. So for Australia, it's just about trying to go out there and try and win some games. If they can, that's great. If they can't, well, that's disappointing. So it's going to be very tough.
Yeah, we have a look at the Super 12 now, and I'm just seeing there's Australia, Bangladesh, England, South Africa, and West Indies. And then the other Super 12, the other group, is Afghanistan, India, Namibia, and New Zealand. And there'll also be Pakistan and Scotland. So what's your take on this Super 12? What's your predictions for it?
Well, it's going to be interesting in both groups, actually. We just mentioned group number one, obviously the group of death, which is going to be very interesting to see how that goes. Group number two is going to be interesting. You've got India, Pakistan, New Zealand, Afghanistan, and now Scotland. So my predictions, who's going to make it to the semis, is probably the West Indies and England for group one. To me, they are the two teams that are the top teams in T20 cricket, obviously, both the finalists from 2016. So I think they should go through. It's going to be very difficult up against those other teams. Going to pose some challenges for them, but I think they'll go through group one. Group number two is going to be interesting. It's going to be a major battle for those two semi-final spots. But I think India will go through, and it's either a toss of a coin between Pakistan or New Zealand to go through to the semis. So,
lots of groups of death indeed. So, It's a very exciting World Cup. Now we're going to take you through domestic cricket. The Strikers played the Hurricanes, and the Stars played the Heat, and also WA versus Tasmania, which I'll probably take you through. Firstly, the WBBL. What do you say about that?
Yeah, WBBL's been good so far in the matches that we've had. The women playing really well and showcasing their skills and talent, especially international players as well. So the WBBL continues to grow and develop into one of the premier women's tournaments in world cricket for the women's. So that's great to see. And hopefully we get some more exciting games to come in this season because the women play very exciting cricket.
The Scorchers are playing tonight, the women's side. I'll probably be distracted by the World Cup, but that'll be very exciting. WA versus Tasmania, oh my goodness. The Tasmanians were practically on fire. They were a strong side. They just playing in the colder conditions in Perth. Usually it's not this cold, and now it's gotten warm again in Perth. But it's actually the conditions that have favoured Tasmania in the WACA, and it often doesn't favour away teams, but if you get a fluke in the weather patterns and the conditions change, the ball starts to swing. And the bowlers are used to that in Tasmania. So, generally speaking, England could do well this Ashes series. I'm very much looking forward to it. My first cricket question for you, is it ethical for Australia to place international games on pay TV? And what are the effects of this happening?
Well, it isn't ideal, isn't it? Obviously, since they changed the rights in Australia a few years ago, now we have two networks covering cricket, free-to-air and pay TV, which puts most people at a disadvantage. It's changed the way the game's being broadcast in Australia. Some people don't like it. Other people prefer that. That's their preference. The effects of it, pretty much that young children and kids won't be able to watch international cricket on free-to-air TV because it's all on pay TV, which is a shame because that's how you get into the game. That's how you learn the game, watch the game, love the game. Sadly, it's the world we live in at the moment, I'm afraid. We're all going down that route. But I do worry that Australia may go down the route of England in terms of Fox, buying all the rights like Sky Sports do in England. And it's just all on pay TV rather than free-to-air. That may happen in Australia. I hope it doesn't. I think they'll keep the balance, but the current deal at the moment's not great. You can't watch men's ODIs or T20s on free-to-air TV. You can watch test matches, women's matches, BBL, WBBL matches, half and half on free-to-air and pay TV, obviously. So, yeah, probably Cricket Australia may have rushed into the deal. Obviously, cricket boards think about the profits and the money at the end of the day. They don't think about the fans and what they want. You know, when the next deal's up for renewal or, they come up with a new deal, probably they need to rethink it again, really, because a lot of people are not happy about it. Cricket Australia need to think about the fans first rather than the profits. Same with both networks, free-to-air and pay TV.
Yeah, that's a very good point you make. And, it's very disappointing to see cricket just being milked by these pay TV stations that have just been, just taken over the sport a little bit. As someone who would love to work in commentary, I feel like it's very... If I end up commentating on Fox, it would be fun, but it would also be in the back of your mind. You'd always think, is this ethical? Is this good? What am I doing here? What cause am I having? And another thing in the Australian cricket system, because it's great to have an Aussie guest here, is a reserve bowler, a good reserve bowler for Australia. James Pattinson was a very good reserve bowler, but he retired a few days ago. Why does the Australian team have a lack of depth in their sides in all three formats, would you say, Jack?
Okay, the reason for that, you're right. We do have a lack of depth in all three formats. For example, our T20 side went to West Indies and Bangladesh. We sent our B team and we got thrashed 4-1 and 4-1. So that shows the depth in T20 cricket's not there. Our ODI depth has been on the decline for some time as well. We struggled a few years ago in ODI cricket. We're starting to get back into good form, but the depth's not there. The main concern is our test depth. As you said, James Pattinson recently retired, and our depth in Test cricket is not good at the moment, especially in batting. Not so much bowling. I think we always produce good fast bowlers in Australia and good bowlers. So we're never, empty of that. But the batting is quite thin at the moment. Now, back in the old days when Australia dominated in the 90s, we had great depth. And our Test cricket and ODI teams, I should say, were quite good. The reason why it was so good back then is because players knew they had to improve their games and get better. Otherwise, they couldn't get into the side, Test side and ODI side, because competition for spots was such, it was very tough to get in. So they had to work on their game. In that era, where a lot of players played first-class cricket and one-day cricket for Australia back in that era, they were very good, but they didn't get the opportunity to play Test cricket for Australia. There's too many to list, but there were some very good players who didn't get that opportunity because of the competition for spots and the depth being so good. So why the drop-off in depth? Well, it's a reason of things. Number one, as I said, that dominant era, once it finished, the generational change happened, and we started to go downwards. You can't replicate that. It's very hard to generate that once-in-a-lifetime generation because it's very hard to just get those players back again, like we did back in the 90s when Australia would dominate. So that's one reason. Number two, the quality of the competitions domestically in Australia have been on the decline, and they're not really doing their job, which is producing players for international cricket. The Sheffield Shield, for many seasons, the quality of cricket's been poor. We see more draws and games are quite meaningless. And the quality is not quite there as it was back in the day. The one-day cup's the same as well. The BBL's even the same. It wasn't what it was at the start when it first started. So, and the third reason is the sample size of players to choose from. Now, in Australia, we only have 6 teams to select 3 squads for all 3 formats. I'm going to use India and England as an example here. The reason that they're so good in all 3 formats and have good depth is because they've got a bigger sample size of players to choose from, because their competitions have more teams, and more teams means more players. Like in India, their Ranchi Trophy, which is their first class competition, they've got 38 teams. You go to the county championship in England, that's 18 teams. And then obviously it's pretty much the same number throughout the domestic competitions that they have in one day and T20 cricket. And obviously they have the 100 in the IPL now, so that adds it even more. So that's why India and England have such good depth, because of those bigger competitions, bigger sample size of players to choose from. So therefore you can choose more players, have more depth, whereas here in Australia, we've got a smaller sample size, smaller competitions, less teams, we've got less options to choose from. So that's pretty much some of the reasonings behind the lack of depth in Australian cricket. Now, you talk about depth, you talk about the Australian women's team, for example. The depth in women's cricket is quite good because Australia's been dominating for quite some time in women's cricket. Because it's sort of like the Australian men's team of the 90s. That's what the women's team is now. They've got that generation of players who can come through and get that, depth. So the lack of depth is certainly there in men's cricket in Australia, but in women's cricket is in good health. So hopefully in the future we can get the depth up again in Australian men's cricket.
How can we get smaller teams more opportunities to play international Test cricket?
We know there's evidence that Test cricket is being played a lot less by these smaller nations. How can we incentivise them to get into the Test format and actually boost the game and play it and play the longer format out? What needs to be done?
The simple answer to that is play them in the World Test Championship. That's the simple answer there, Ethan, if I'm honest. Okay, the reason is because when the ICC first came up with the World Test Championship, they've only included 9 teams in that. Now, in Test cricket, there's only 12 Test playing nations. Okay, Zimbabwe, Afghanistan, and Ireland don't play in the World Test Championship. They should. In my opinion, it's not a World Test Championship because there's only 9 teams. Because you're not including those smaller countries. So the ICC said we can't fit them in because of the scheduling, and the competition will drag on a little bit with the extra teams because they want to finish it in a 2-year cycle. The international scheduling as it is already is an absolute mess. So the ICC really need to fix the scheduling because they come up with the scheduling. And they can definitely fit those countries in the World Test Championship, but they don't want to. That's their job, the ICC. Their job is to govern cricket and make sure cricket's being spread around the world. And they're not doing that at the moment. For example, Australia hasn't played Zimbabwe in a test match since 2003-4, and now it's 2021. So it's been a long time. So these smaller countries get pushed away by cricket boards, and it's money again. That word, money, profits and revenue. Because when you play a big series like Australia and England, it earns a lot of money, and cricket boards care about making profits. Whereas you play against Zimbabwe, for example, it's not going to get you the money and the revenue that you want. And all cricket boards want to make a profit and break even. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the Netherlands as well. There's a process that they have to go through to get test status. So countries have to go through a process to get test status. That's what Ireland and Afghanistan did. And that was ticked off by the ICC. So that's a long process as well for these countries like the Netherlands and other countries who want to get test status. It takes a long time to get there. So at the end of the day, it's all about money. It's about cricket boards not wanting to play against those countries, but those countries play against themselves anyway, in test matches and ODIs and T20s. But if they keep not playing test cricket against the bigger teams, the only way they're going to get better is playing against those bigger teams and improve. If they don't do that, they're not going to get any better. So at the end of the day, the ICC need to try to incorporate them into the World Test Championship, because that will be the solution for them to play more cricket. Otherwise, they're going to give up and not play Test cricket and just play ODIs and T20s. That's where it's going to head to if they don't get any Test matches against the top-ranked countries. So that's probably the solution to solve that problem.
Very wonderful to hear. Now, this comes to the end of our podcast. Thank you so much for joining. It means a lot, and it's been a wonderful show. I'm just so excited about the World Cup. There's been so much to pack up down and all that. Share your thoughts in the comments if there's something we missed. There's so much to cover. There's only so much I can cover in this amount of time. Otherwise, we'll be going on for hours about this amazing World Cup. I don't have hours, but thank you so much for joining and giving up your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ethan. It's a pleasure to talk cricket with you today. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, awesome. And check out Dibbly Dobbly Podcast on YouTube. Also subscribe to this channel, like and share this video around in the community.